Hey guys, welcome to my second video on my interview with Elsie. This is part 2, and basically in this video we talk more about programs but also non-program kind of like initiatives and things you can do for students to get experience. We talk about Elsie's failures and barriers going into STEM, as well as what she learned from them, why it's important to keep an open mind in careers, in academics, and in your career and STEM journey in general. The most important part of this video, in case you can't watch it all, is definitely this part of the video because she talks about a specific pre-med program that's offered at Columbia, which gives specifically minority students a lot of experience, minority high school students. And in this video and in this section, we also talk about kind of like academic and summer programs like these in general for high school students, kind of like what they require, what you need to keep in mind before applying, etc. So yeah, here's the second half of the video.
And I kind of just wanted to add to that. So have you seen any collaborations kind of like at Columbia or in general, like at academic institutions or industry, kind of like collaborating with the community, just like helping minorities get started in science, overcome barriers in science, overcome like stereotypes in science. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, before I was at Columbia, returned to Columbia, I was at Cornell, and they had a pre-med program specifically for minorities. And
Mhm.
what they did, it was held during the summer, and they hosted about 25 minority students from various high schools in the country, primarily in the city, just because it was easier to attend. And they would stay on campus and shadow faculty, principal investigators, and understand what research really looks like in terms of how am I going to research something at the library? How am I going to create a poster and do a poster presentation? How am I going to look at an article and emulate the sort of research that they're doing? How will I get the skill sets to do, you know, um, wet and dry techniques in the lab? And I think that really exposes them to key players in STEM. It also exposes them into what is really going to be expected of them for the next 5, 6, 7 years, however long it's going to take them to sort of proceed through the pipeline. But it also shows them how rewarding it can be because it's not just something that is rewarding to yourself, but how you're giving back to the academy, how you're giving back to the community. We also do at Columbia lots of high school programs where we invite high school students throughout the city from underperforming schools, and it's like an entire summer session, and I believe that's run through the dean's office at the medical center. And I know I was a part of that too, and they gave you these sort of crash courses into basic math and science, and that just kind of exposed you into what it really looks like to do these experiments in a laboratory, what it looks like to try and solve complex sort of equations, and just getting that um, mentality where you are critically, thinking, you're problem solving, you're thinking about innovative ways to solve a problem. So it's not just one way of thinking or one way of solving or creating solutions. And I think that's what's so great about DEI and STEM. It just sort of gets all those ideas sort of flowing. And it's important to have sort of, all conversations, all lived perspectives at the conversation table.
Perfect. And I kind of just wanted to add on to that. So, like you were saying, like a bunch of these kind of like programs and organizations are like very helpful. They seem like they have a lot to offer, but I'm sure they're like very highly competitive. Like, maybe like I'm sure a bunch of them like you have to pay a certain amount. So I kind of wanted to ask as well, like, would you say that all kind of like programs are created equal, or like um maybe if your GPA isn't as high, but like you have like those skills that are equally as important, like the resilience and the grit, and you still kind of like want to get started in STEM as a minority, like would you say that there's less of a kind of like program route, I guess you could take? Was there more of a like yeah, something you can do on your own, like maybe
Right,
cold emailing, like reaching out through your through your own school system. Like
right.
what advice, comments would you give on
Yeah.
that?
Sure. Great question. There are existing programs, bridge programs, as I mentioned. They all have their own sort of criteria. Some do require a GPA minimum, some may not. I know the MARC program, which is a program that is hosted at many institutions across the nation. The URISE program also is another bridge program. Their GPA requirement, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's not as strict as, say, the MARC program. But the difficulty with those programs is that they're very, very competitive. And
Mm.
so,
Mhm.
the earlier you know about what these sort of criteria are, the better it is that you would be able to align your GPA according to what those requirements are. And I think definitely, search a lot of what's in what the NSF and the NIH have. Also, a lot of these honor societies have lots of information on scholarships and on grants and things like that that would, put you in contact with mentors in that field. So there's just different ways that you can sort of apply yourself into the research, into getting into a program that best suits your needs and what you are actually trying to do with your academic and career trajectories.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then I kind of wanted to ask,
Sure.
what actions did you take personally? This can be in high school, in college, or professionally working in administration before you got into working at getting an advanced degree at Columbia. So, kind of like what actions did you take to get to the next step?
Hmm. I think a lot of what I did was I looked to see individuals who were in positions that I wanted to be in the future, and
Hmm. Uh-huh.
using LinkedIn to see what positions they held, what degrees they had, and from where. And I think that really sort of helps sculpt what I thought I could do, given that sort of blueprint. And again, deciding would I really be happy in those positions, understanding that those positions are going to be challenging, and I'm not necessarily going to be, walking in a room and everyone's just going to support me and, buy into my ideas.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely helped in terms of understanding what it was that I wanted to do, and what it was going to take to get there. So we're talking about, work experience. We're talking about your educational experience. We're also talking about where your mindset is in terms of what strategies you would use as a practitioner. And I think those were different sort of ideas I had and that I applied to help me get to where I'm at right now.
Right. So kind of like what you were saying, like diving into kind of like work, not, I mean, obviously there's always kind of like that, I guess maybe like internal fear of like, oh, what if I do it wrong? Will they judge me, etc. But kind of just like going into it anyway, having that sort of like resilient mentality.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think, yeah,
right.
thank you. That's like really important
Yeah,
at any stage.
sure. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And also understanding there are going to be failures. You are going
Yeah.
to be rejected, and those rejections don't always look the same, right? But it's how you respond to them, and how you sort of keep trudging forward is
Mm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
critical. And that's really what's important. And one of the questions that you asked was like, what I think does success look like? And for me, success is not, my certificates or my degrees. I mean, that was sort of a product of success, but for me, it was more my journeys, and the relationships that I've built and I still uphold. I think those are my successes. Those are my success stories, that, mean so much more to me than, a piece of paper.
Yes, that's actually that's really important to think about. And so now that we're kind of like on the topic of kind of like failures and like challenges and kind of like that stuff, do you think you could give me maybe go a little bit more in depth about like a specific example or whatever that comes to your mind of like how a failure or a barrier has kind of like set you up for success?
Yeah, I actually got my undergrad degree in communications, and so my dream was just to be a journalist. I enjoy
Oh,
writing.
uh-huh.
I felt that was my calling, and I
Mm.
remember I had applied to the School of Journalism at Columbia, and I didn't get accepted, and that was like my first sort of real experience with someone saying no to me
Mm.
academically. And, that really made me rethink, is journalism really something that I would be happy in doing? I knew that I was good at it, but that didn't necessarily mean that's my calling. And so
Hmm.
I took a few steps back and I could have not thought about grad school, period, right? But I
Mm.
thought about what other degree would I be happy in doing, because journalism was kind of a really sort of fine-tuned thing for me. And I didn't want to look left or right. It was just always something I thought I wanted to do, which I did. But again, there were other things I never really sort of thought about or massaged in terms of, would that be something that I would be fulfilled and happy doing? And so I looked at public administration, and that sort of covered so many sort of aspects within higher ed. And I was already sort of 5, 6 years working in higher ed. And I really wanted to make a career out of it. And unfortunately, when we go to school, college, undergrad, we don't think about, oh, I want to become a faculty member,
Mm.
or, I want to be in administration. There really aren't sort of careers that expose you to those sort of, you know, careers in undergrad. And
Mm.
I think that's really important because, we're always thinking about, what we're going to do in terms of our research. But, what's also important is teaching and higher ed. And I think lots of folks um, don't put that into the equation. And I think
Right.
when I did, it was you know, from a failure, from not being admitted to the School of Journalism. And, that just kind of opened up other sort of possibilities, and those possibilities opened up windows, and those windows opened up doors. So I think definitely utilizing failures as a strength, and just going with it and not giving up and thinking about, you know, backup, what's going to be your plan A, your plan B, your plan C, and so forth.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I can cut this part off later. My Wi-Fi is just like not being the best right now. I'm so sorry about that. Has it been a
Okay.
little bit glitchy on your end?
That's fine.
Okay,
No, it's been
perfect.
fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, oh my God. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Great. All right. So kind of like talking about that. So obviously that failure kind of led you to an important realization that I think it's kind of like critical that a bunch of people early on and then like in college and professionally like kind of make like they might think like, yeah, I'm good at this. Like you were saying, like I'm good at journalism, like I'm good at math, I'm good at like memorizing kind of thing. So I'm
Hmm.
going to med school or I'm going to do this or something like that. But yeah, like you were saying, it's very important to kind of like consider like, yeah, your passions because you don't want to be stuck in something where you're going to be miserable or where like it's going to be so cutthroat and time consuming and yet like you're not fulfilled. So
Right.
yeah.
Or you're, 5, 6 years in, and then you decide this isn't for me. And all that time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I've had plenty of students who, getting ready to graduate college or even grad school, and they are like, I don't want to do this. I think my calling has been something else, but this is something I've tried to, sort of see through all the way through. But, making up your
Mm.
mind early on, and also making your plans sort of malleable so they're not just always, rigid in terms of, this is where I want to be, and I'm going to give myself X amount of years to get that done. I think sometimes that can be limiting as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So I kind of wanted to ask, we were kind of you were talking about kind of like your version of success before, but I also
Mhm.
kind of wanted to ask, like, what would a successful young kind of like minority getting into STEM look like for you?
The way it looks now, or in a perfect world?
Let's do both if that's okay with you.
Sure. So I think for now, a lot of what concerns me is what does the future of DEI look like, right?
Mm,
Not just within STEM, but also within higher ed in general. And so, how can we sort of still continue to um, sort of vet applicants where we are having the best representation in terms of minorities, in terms of everyone else at the table? So I think if you are someone who's looking at applications, what are going to be telltale signs of an individual who is doing well? So we're thinking about how are we going to reward someone in terms of meritocracy. But a lot of the times we have to assure that we are also being careful with overrepresentation and underrepresentation and what that balance looks like. I think having more individuals that are minorities are it's great because they lend themselves to so much um, lived experiences and perspective taking that is helpful because it's not just about showing up and being present and getting the best grades. It's also about how exposed are you to different cultures,
mm,
how social and emotionally intelligent are you? How do you celebrate other people who look differently than you and who've grown up differently than you, have different socio-economic backgrounds? And I think that's really what an ideal sort of environment in STEM would look like for a minority is just having, as many different perspectives, different individuals, different cultures, just differences that are present at the table that you look at in a positive way, not in a threatening way.
perfect. Thank you so, so much. And I kind of wanted to ask,
Sure.
so I know that you and many other people kind of consider literature and like reading articles, research as important before you, well, just getting into kind of like a STEM or a field you might be interested in, or maybe like applying for an internship kind of thing. So yeah, can you talk a bit more about like how like the importance in your opinion, and maybe like any books, journals, articles that maybe inspired you or you find like really helpful for people who maybe, yeah, who are getting into STEM?
Sure. I like to read a lot of Veranda Montgomery, and a lot of people refer to her as the plant lady. And she wrote a book, various books related to plants and botany. The one that I really, really enjoy is called Lessons from Plants. And she made this sort of analogy that really always just stood out to me, which is, when a plant is not doing well, we question its environment, right? We question whether it's getting sufficient sunlight or maybe too much. We question how much water is the plant getting, too much or not enough. So we always question its environment. However, we don't apply that same mindset to individuals. So when an individual is not doing well, is not thriving,
Mm.
we don't question the environment. We think the problem
Blame the
lies solely with the
individual. Hmm.
individual. Right, right. And a lot of the times that's just, the wrong way to think. And I think Veranda made an exceptional analogy in that when we look at plants versus when we look at people. And it's a sort of the same concept. And I think that really just kind of always speaks to me when I look at, individuals who I feel might be falling through the pipeline or just might be a little bit too quiet in the office or too quiet in class. It's not necessarily what that person is about, but what does this environment look like for them, right?
Mm,
And so I think that's
yeah.
really it's critical. It really is.
Emotional intelligence is like crucial and at like
Yeah.
basically in anything, like in the
Right.
classroom, in a professional career, anything.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Perfect. And now kind of a question that's more like off track. So what purchase of $100 or less that you has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months? So it can be kind of like anything,
Hmm.
but what do you think?
Well, I sit a lot in my job. And so I get very tight with my muscles. So I ended up buying this like massage gun, and that really like helped my legs, helped like my hips because they get very tight, and that was something that I found just to be sort of a life savior. So highly recommended. Definitely that price point, you can get it in Amazon, but that was something that I kind of bought just to see how it would work out, and it's been a godsend. It really has. And that was a really
I
great
love
question
it.
because I had to think about that. $100 and less, right?
Ugh, I love it so much. I love those. I love those guns. I think I've used it at one point because my muscles get really sore too, but oh my
Yeah.
God, it's amazing when your muscles are sore and it's just, I love it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of
Yeah.
course. Of course.
Thank you so, so much,
Of
Elsie. Thank you
course.
for joining me on this interview.
Of
Have a
course.
nice rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.
So that was the second half of my interview with Elsie Spencer. I hope you guys learned a lot, and I will be coming out with an Elsie's Takeaways video where I analyze kind of like what we learned from this interview. And so yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, share with anyone who might be interested, and I'll see you guys next week.